Welcome to the Dr. Terra Show. I am your host, Dr. Terra Defoe, and today we have an awesome show in place for you. I want you to meet two individuals who's going to tell their stories on how their chains of events changed their lives. Please welcome Ken Nixon and his mother, Tracy Nixon. Ken and Tracy, thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me.
So I know the back end story, but we're going to walk through this process. And I wanted to hear, again, from both of you that tells the story of what happened through your lens. And I want people to understand why we're going to take this turn in this story, because I want people to understand what you went through, Ken, and Mom, Tracy, what you went through. So Ken, please describe the chain of events that landed you in the Michigan Department of Corrections.
Somewhere in the beginning of 2005, my girlfriend at the time began having an affair with the best friend of mine. It led to us having problems, and on May 19th, 2005, my front door was torn down by guys in tactical gear, big guns, bulletproof vests, and I was arrested for a crime that I didn't even know had been committed. I later on found out during the interrogation that someone close to my best friend, it was his girlfriend, and her children's home had been set on fire the night prior, and I was accused of setting the fire.
Wow.
And they used he and I's differences over the previous few months as a motive to say that I had reason to do this. In reality, I didn't even know the crime had taken place.
Wow.
The detectives actually told me about what happened.
So you learned for the first time what happened by the detectives.
Yeah, I was at 1300 Bobian when I found out what happened. And I literally had no idea that that had taken place.
So now they charge you. What did they officially charge you with?
I was officially charged with 2 counts of felony murder, 4 counts of attempted murder, and 1 count of arson.
It is now moving towards sentencing day, and you're in the courtroom. As you know, we see on TV, they have the defendant to stand, and then the verdict is handed down. What was your verdict?
Verdict was guilty on all counts. They read them individually, one after another, but I don't remember anything past the first guilty verdict. Nothing even mattered past the first guilty verdict. It was guilty of felony murder. And you can only give me 1 life sentence, so the rest of it didn't even matter, but it was guilty on all counts.
Mom, the night the police stormed in?
I got the call at about 6:45 that morning.
Wow.
Girlfriend's mom had called me and said there had been an incident and the 2 of them had been arrested for murder. And my whole world went black.
Take your time.
The first thought that came to my mind was to get my twins out of the house, take them to school so that they wouldn't see it on television. Right after I got the call, I remember seeing on the news ladies saying, fatal fire, 2 children died, 19-year-old suspect in custody. I had no clue it was my son.
Wow.
After the phone call, I immediately got the smaller children to school so that I can take care of business. And it was an unreal feeling, an unreal thought. I couldn't even absorb it because I knew better. I knew just from when I was told that there was a fire, I knew that it wasn't my son that set that fire. I knew because at 12 years old, he wouldn't let me leave a candle lit overnight. You know, it was, to him, that was, Mama, that's hot. Mama, that'll burn. Ma, don't leave that burning all night. So I knew better. From that moment, I knew that I had a fight on my hands.
Yes.
So it's hard to explain.
Because you're now learning
Yes.
of the details as they're unfolding.
As the day was going, I was learning of the details and what was going on, what happened. And I spoke to the best friend, and I listened to what he had to say. I listened to his girlfriend and what she had to say. But my heart told me I knew better. I knew my son didn't set that fire.
So we're in the courtroom. So you go through all of the other parts, the official charging, we're in the courtroom, and when he says that he blanked out, Mom, where were you?
Zoned out, absolutely. I remember the judge saying, his words were, the boy have been found guilty on all 8 counts.
Wow.
And I'm sentencing him to 487 years with no chance of parole.
Wow. 480?
That was the numbers he gave my son. And my sister was sitting next to me, and I said, I know I didn't just hear him say that to my son. And she held on to me. There was a young man sitting next to me, and I asked him the same question, and he held on to me. And I said, I don't think so. And I remember standing and saying, you a lie. I'm going to get my son. He will walk concrete before I take my last breath. And I meant that.
Yes, 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 yes. Is this your first time hearing your mother say that?
Yeah. You never really get an opportunity to have these conversations when you've been wrongfully convicted of something. You try not to elicit too much emotion. It's just not a comfortable thing. You add that on top of 15-minute phone calls. I mean, you're limited to what can be said in that amount of time.
Right.
So you try to steer clear of anything that could cause any sort of emotional turbulence for your family at the time. So yeah, this is the first time that I'm hearing some of this.
And when you're hearing it, it begins that process
Yes.
for healing.
Yeah.
Because you need to hear, that's your mother.
Yeah.
No, if nobody else is there, your mother is the ride or die. Let's be clear about that. So if nobody else is always there, it's your mom.
Yes.
And so it's that time where you have to now start taking that to hear her say with her own words how she looked at what happened back then. Because again, this is your first time being able to be able to hear it and hear it and process it at the same time. So while incarcerated, we take that long ride up 94 to Jackson Correctional, which most people know to be the processing center or quarantine. Describe what was happening in Jackson. What happened when you arrived?
When I arrived, it was complete chaos. Like, there's guys yelling, the officers are yelling. You're getting 50 different instructions to do different stuff. You're trying to understand what's going on around you and pay attention to what you're being told to do at the same time. And it's not like it's an individual process, right? This is meant to be a factory line of people going into the system. They don't just take you individually to prison. They take a busload of people.
Yes.
So when that time comes, that officer that's yelling, he's not just yelling at you. He's yelling at you plus the 50 guys that are coming with you. So, I mean, of course, at that time, a lot of us we'd never been to prison. So you getting all sort of mixed emotional responses to this officer in uniform yelling at you. You know, some guys are like, dude, you're not gonna talk to me like that. Some guys are like, okay, let's just get it over with. You know, it's a very, I guess you can say, emotionally destructive process. Like, there's no simple way to deal with what can be considered an authority figure yelling at you, you know, for something that you're not even aware that you're doing.
Right.
There's a thing in prison where the officers tell you, it's not my job to know the rules, it's yours. Well, I just got
Wow.
here. It's impossible for me to know the rules, you know, but you're being penalized for things that you don't even know to be a rule.
And that goes to the jailhouse mentality that people say on the street. This is stuff that you learn on the inside, because of course you can't learn it on the outside.
Yeah, I mean, prison is literally a world inside of a world. It operates and functions, and it stands on its own as an environment. It's a world. I mean, everything that happens out here happens in there, just on a smaller scale. It's highly concentrated, and again, I mean, you're taught traffic laws when you're growing up, right? That's a part of society. So in prison, you're taught traffic laws. You can't stop on the sidewalk at some facilities. You can't play basketball in certain areas of the facility. I mean, these are rules that you learn as you go through. They don't teach you this stuff. You're expected to learn it on your own.
Wow, 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 wow. So Mom, when was the first phone call?
That I can remember. The first phone call, I remember him telling me, stop crying. Stop crying, you're gonna make yourself sick. And my response was, what do I have left? So my tears were my comfort at the time. It took me about 6 months to grasp the thought of being able to care for my other children. I was lost. He was my oldest son, so I was kind of lost, and I didn't know which way to go. So in turn, moreover, I was trying to send my other 3 away so that I could
Process what was happening. Yeah.
But they wouldn't go. They wouldn't go.
They knew something was going on.
They
with
was
Mom.
like, nah, we right here,
Yeah.
here.
And so we're going to take a brief break. When we come back, I want to talk about what were some of the activities that you did while incarcerated, and then the journey of how you are now sitting here with me, and it is not 480 years later.
See? Yeah.
So I am your host, Dr. Terra Defoe, and you're watching Dr. Terra. We're going to take a brief break. We'll be right back.
There comes a time when we all feel as if God has left us alone to handle our own problems. There comes a time when our emotions seem to get the best of us. Have you ever wanted to know how to stop the emotional pain from depression and loneliness? There is an answer. Are you ready? God never intended for you to fight your battles alone, and God never left you alone to handle your problems. Dr. Terra Defoe outlines how to recognize and access God's healing power to overcome those things that are stopping you from experiencing His best. For $12.95, you can order your copy of You Never Walk Alone today by visiting www.IamTerraDefoe.com. From this day forward, you may never walk alone again.
Impact, where urban family, faith, lifestyle, entertainment, culture, collide, all here on Impact.
Welcome back. I am your host, Dr. Terra Defoe, and you're watching Dr. Terra. Today we have Ken Nixon and his mom, Tracy Nixon. And Ken just shared with us his chain of events that landed him in the Department of Corrections. And for the first time, he heard today his mom share her side of the story of what she felt when he went inside. So welcome back. What were some of the activities that you did while incarcerated? I know they have different programs, they have different jobs that you can kind of take part in. Did you participate in any of those programs?
Yes, I did basically anything positive I could find. I spent a lot of time in the law library. I wasn't big on activities, physical activities, but anything education-based, I wanted to be a part of it. However, majority of my time was spent in the law library. I wanted to be where the information was, and as we all know, society or otherwise, the only place where information is held is the library.
Yes.
So that's where I wanted to be.
Yes, and because according to the judge, you were going to be there for 80 years?
Yes.
So you had 480 years of being in the law library.
Yes.
And that number, when you hear it, it's unreal. I mean, in our lifetime, if we look at 480 years, we go back 480 years, we were in slavery.
Absolutely.
So to hear that number, I mean, I don't know about you in that number, but that is something. That is a really testament. But like I said, you're sitting here with me, and it's not 480 years later.
Right.
So let's fast forward as you begin the conversation of what landed you back into Detroit. So we have year 1 goes past. Mm-hmm. We have year 2, year 5, 10, 15 years. How long was it before the Innocence Project took on your case?
I was officially accepted in March of 2019, so 14 years before I was, almost 14 years, 13 and some change, before I was officially accepted. They close to a 2-year, or a little more than a 2-year review before I was officially accepted, and they decided to represent me.
But when you went in, you were 19 years old.
Yes.
Wow, so your adult years were spent incarcerated.
Yes.
Which you don't get those years back.
No.
Wow, Mom, 15 years.
15 years.
So he calls and starts sharing with you, or did they tell Mom first that they were taking on the case, or did they talk to you and you talk to Mom? How did that go?
I knew prior. I knew shortly before. There's a process that takes place. You know, they tell you in advance that they have to schedule a meeting. There's some documents that need to be signed. So you have to, they have to come see you in order to get those documents signed. So we kind of knew in advance what was happening. I told her, of course, and I think from that point, the energy around everything started to change. The attorney at the time, she was a young attorney, she was fresh. We were kind of taking a chance on each other at the time. I was a gamble for her, and she was a gamble for me. I'd never had a female attorney prior to her, and I'd also never, she'd never had, this was one of her, few cases coming in, that she actually was the point person. So, yeah, when I told her, things started to feel different at that point.
Good. So now they're taking on your case. Mm-hmm. You're going through the process. You're communicating back and forth. What were some of the conversations as they were walking you through the process of going to get evidence or re-interviewing people? Did they tell you the different steps that they were taking, or they just came back and reported what they found?
Yeah, there was a strategy. There was a plan. We kind of discussed it prior to about the DNA testing. Thank God for the Conviction Integrity Unit, because
Yes.
they simplified things a whole lot. What would normally be probably a years-long process, we were able to shrink into a couple of months. Locating
Awesome.
the evidence, getting the evidence shipped off, picking which lab it went to, who was to cover the cost of the testing, who was the point person for information back and forth from the lab. All of that came into play. I had a monthly meeting scheduled with my attorneys to discuss what was happening, what the next step would be. So we kept in contact pretty frequently. There was a few points where misinformation kind of clouded what happened, but I mean that's a normal part of the process. You know, you can't really hold on to each specific detail. You know, there's a lot of people involved. There's a lot of working parts that goes into this. So yes, I was very involved in the planning part. I kept up on the information.
So everything falls into place, and then you get the notice or you get the communication that you are coming home. What was that conversation?
My attorney at the time, I'd switched. There was a switch in the office at this point. I had a new attorney. I get called up front one day, and he says, "Ken, I got some good news for you." And I'm like, "Okay." And he's like, "You're going home."
Wow.
And I just kind of like froze. Like nothing made sense at that point. I just froze. And I can remember him, like I know that I was blank now that I look back at it, but in that moment, it seems like, 1 second is like 20 hours.
Right.
So, and I, at the time, I didn't realize that I had taken the long pause, and he says, "Ken, you still there?" "Oh yeah, I'm still there."
Oh yeah, I'm still on the phone, yeah.
So you kind of, it took me a minute to process it. My attorney and the director of the Innocence Project was on the call, and they just was like, "You know what, just take it in. Just take it in, take all the time you need. We're here. Just, if you don't need to say nothing, don't
say nothing.
Just take it in and accept it." And,
Mom,
yeah.
what happened when he called home?
Well, he did not tell me for sure that he knew. But I will say this, I knew. I had already claimed it. I told them my son was coming home at the time he came home. Months ago, I said, he'll be home in March, right before his birthday. His birthday Monday. So
Wow.
I knew. When I knew everything was in motion, it was still kind of unbelievable, and I would literally talk to myself and say things positive on the page of, "It's okay, I know he'll be here in a couple weeks." And for me, the moment for me was the exoneree that was released before him, about 14 or 15 days before him. He had told me back in October, "Well, Mom, they're working on 5 people, and I'm one of the 5. And I remember through the months counting each guy that had got out. And the guy before him, the night before, I had fell asleep on the couch. And about 4 in the morning, I had turned the news on. And I remember the newscaster saying that there was going to be an exoneree the next day. His name was such and such, and Kim Worthy and Val Newman and them had got him out, and I rolled off the couch. I hit the floor and I said, "Number 4, my son will be home. That's number 4. And I just started talking to the TV like, "That's it, my son coming home." As those 2 weeks went, things started going faster and faster, and I was like, "Wait a minute, is this happening?" And within 15 days after that, he was home.
What was the judge's comment when you had to, what was his comment?
At the exoneration hearing?
Yes.
He said that,
And this was the same judge who sentenced you?
yes, this was the same judge that sentenced me. He said in open court that day, February 18th, he realized that he'd made some mistakes 15 years earlier during the trial, and
Wow.
he'd said some things that he probably shouldn't have said, that today he knows are not true. So, I mean, that was
How did that make you feel?
relieved, right? It made me feel relieved because a person of such high status in society is finally acknowledging a mistake,
Yes.
right? Our system doesn't always get it right.
Yes.
You don't have people that are willing to accept responsibility when they've made a mistake. And to hear him say that in open court, relief.
Wow. Mom?
Yeah, it was a
Relief.
sigh of relief for me. I was able to breathe.
Yes.
I was able to sleep
Yes.
peacefully.
So I remember when we did the interview, you said when they released you, you kind of like just took off running because you didn't know what to expect. If they was gonna change their mind or something.
Yeah.
But you know that's a natural reaction, and so now you don't have to run.
Yeah.
You are here,
Here.
and we want to. What's next? What is next for the Nixon family?
Me personally, I think you and I have discussed this previously. One of the things I want to be a strong advocate for are records retention laws in Michigan.
Yes.
The city of Detroit has an extremely antiquated process in place.
Yes.
We are out of touch with what's going on in surrounding communities, surrounding counties. We're still doing it manually in the city of Detroit. And part of what got me exonerated was records that the city of Detroit had in their possession. And it took me 15 years to accumulate those records.
Wow.
When it shouldn't have.
Right.
It shouldn't have. Oakland and Macomb County both have a digital process that takes days.
Right.
It took me sometimes a year or close to a year to get records that I've requested. And it's not right. It's not fair. There's no justice in that. There's no fairness in that. There's a guy sitting on his bunk somewhere right now waiting for some records.
For some records.
You know, his innocence could be sitting in a box somewhere in a warehouse that's owned by the city of Detroit. And because they're being it's rude but cheap,
Yeah.
the city of Detroit is being cheap. And it's not fair to the people that are entitled to these records. The law says they're entitled to them.
Yeah. And so for me, I want to say thank you so much for sharing your story.
Thank you.
I know that it was hard. It was hard for you to have to listen to your mom say it for the first time. And then you happened to sit there, but you held your faith. You held your faith, and now it is not 480 years later. You are sitting here in 2021 being able to share your story. Again, thank you for coming on the show. I am your host, Dr. Terra Defoe, and you have been watching the Dr. Terra Show. Thank you.
There comes a time when we all feel as if God has left us alone to handle our own problems. There comes a time when our emotions seem to get the best of us. Have you ever wanted to know how to stop the emotional pain from depression and loneliness? There is an answer. Are you ready? God never intended for you to fight your battles alone, and God never left you alone to handle your problems. Dr. Terra Defoe outlines how to recognize and access God's healing power to overcome those things that are stopping you from experiencing His best. For $12.95, you can order your copy of You Never Walk Alone today by visiting www.IamTerraDefoe.com. From this day forward, you may never walk alone again.